Um, but yeah, I also like yeah, the UK porn ban. I like this is yeah, it's I mean, I certainly have no place to speak to anybody about like how they're choosing to reblog or set things up because again, my me and my 58 never talk to me and my 58 Tumblr side blogs ever again kind of thing. Like, I'm not in any position to judge, but yeah, it's like figuring out how you can handle the social media that you use in a way that is going to be healthy for you is also something that's important to like figure it out and set your boundaries and everything like that. I'm generally speaking anti VPN, but if I were someplace that had porn bans like at a or ID verification at a national level or whatever, yeah, I would be using a VPN. Like the same reason that like when people travel to China, it's like yeah, using a VPN, you just get past the fucking firewall. Like, so they're it sucks being old enough to remember when the internet didn't suck this way. It sucked in completely different ways. But I'm anti-VPN because it's not actually a privacy tool. And that's the thing is people think that they are privacy tools and they are not. Also, the only VPNs I ever recommend are the ones that are recommended by privacyguides.org or .com or whatever. I'll link it, but I'll bring up the site. I ended up talking about this some on Tumblr last week. But like, yeah, one of the taglines on my blog is I know fuck all about VPNs. I actually don't know very much about VPNs, and that's intentional. Um, because the only thing that I find it useful for is obfuscating your location, and that's not something that I generally speaking have to do. And if I'm obfuscating my location, I would much rather do actual traffic anonymization, which VPNs absolutely do not do. But people think that they are a privacy tool. No, they are a tool for making sure that the information that your ISP sees is not like clear text of what you're doing, but it is agreeing that basically it's shifting the responsibility or the risk from your ISP to your VPN. And there are more privacy focused VPNs out there. Go to Privacy Guides. Yeah, it's privacyguides.org. There are more privacy focused VPNs out there. Privacy Guides is a site run by maniacs for maniacs, and they recommend various privacy tools. They recommend exactly 3 VPNs. And this is part of what I ended up. Yes, VPNs do not provide anonymity. I like that they have this in a red box right at the top. But yeah, this is part of. Thank you. I'm just gonna paste to the general because I do think that people should look at this for all sorts of things. But apparently, by the way, somebody had posted in the chat last time, or somebody sent a message about like a tool that you can use to like do a quote thing. That I'll look more into. But yes, it is definitely a site by maniacs for maniacs. And here's the other thing: is like they'll warn you like specifically like, okay, cool, this doesn't do port forwarding, or this one only has partial support for port forwarding. But this was kind of the thing that came up when I was talking about 404 media. That's the thing is like a lot of the people who are looking for privacy tools and things like that are not aware of what they're actually looking for. So they go get a VPN because they've heard that it's, good for privacy. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you're looking at NordVPN is perfectly willing to sell your data and share your data with other people. That is not a privacy focused tool. And that is actually something that can be a pretty big risk. So yeah, that's why that's why privacy guides. So, and it's email services like that's one where it's like, cool, here are the providers that we recommend, and here's why, and here's how you can pay for them in different methods and things like that. And search engines, these are the security focused search engines or the privacy focused search engines. And let's see, desktop browsers, cool, Mulvad, Firefox, and it has suggestions for how to configure stuff as well, to make things more private. So, Brave, let's see, what are their warnings? Referral code for downloads, filter lists. Yeah, and let's see, software. Let's see if they have operating system recommendations. Let's see what their Office Suite recommendations are. LibreOffice, OnlyOffice. Yeah, I'm not at all surprised that Privacy Guides is not interested in Microsoft Office. So, but yeah, traditional distros of Linux. Yeah, I get. See, so this is part of why I am cautious about recommending certain things. Like, I will link people to VPN and email information on Privacy Guides. I will not link them to the OS recommendations because this is going to be beyond most like casual users. So just password managers. Have we got Bitwarden here? Let's see. Yep, my baby. Love my Bitwarden. Do we have authenticators? Do they recommend the Bitwarden authenticator? Let's see. I don't know. Privacy Guides is really, really helpful, and it is made by people who are privacy obsessed and like will get into like really, really deep detail. I don't know, that's security keys, not yeah, Ubicos are great. I don't use one, but if we were going to use one, they're good. Oh, there we go, MFA. Yeah, so these are the recommendations from them. I still recommend Bitwarden because Bitwarden's really fucking easy to use. Don't use just the built-in Firefox one. I know I'm a complete fucking grind about this, but let me see. We will go to the Bitwarden link because I do have a link about this, and I did update this to explain a little more about the authenticator, but also here is my recipe for how to use Bitwarden. So it is how to set up Bitwarden written like a cooking recipe. Yeah, let's see. So, and also, yes, I know fuck all about VPNs. But yeah, so this just is like kind of a step-by-step on how to set up Bitwarden like with the easiest possible onboarding. And you can import and export passwords. You don't need to do everything all at once. It's extremely simple to use. I love that you can install it across multiple devices, and as many times as you want. I think it's the only video that I have up on the actual video channel for this project is Bitwarden talking about Bitwarden. But yeah, there are many reasons that I don't like browser-only password managers, and it's just people see setting up a proper password manager as something that's like intimidating and like concerning and threatening and scary and everything like that. And once you do it, everything is so much easier with using it that like you feel silly for not having done it before. One of the major differences that you're going to see in between like using the Firefox built-in password manager and a password manager like Bitwarden, where you can install the extension in your browser and also can install the application, is simply using apps on your phone. I use Bitwarden to keep my banking password. That means that I can use my banking password on my phone really easily without having to use the mobile site, and instead I can use the application if I need to for any reason or anything like that. It makes things much, much easier. Or if I'm using like an application from my doctor's office or something like that on my phone. And it is definitely frustrating that, you know, there are all of these things that we have to deal with, but the fact that like it becomes simpler when you've got like the proper tools set up, like makes it a lot less frustrating. No, fucking people who try to set you up with KeePass they're friends, but they're engineers. Sorry, this is Linux brain. So, let's see. Yeah, no, like KeePass is one of the, like is KeePass one of the, I can't remember if KeePass is one of the Linux brain ones. Petty, but the large bastard has one of the fucking Linux braid password managers where it's like, yeah, of course this is incredibly secure because it's not set up to be user friendly. And that's the other reason that I really recommend Bitwarden over a lot of other things, is that like it's so comparatively easy to use that like it lowers the barrier of entry for people who like want to use password managers. A lot of older password managers, especially because they were created by people who were like security obsessed before it was kind of normal to be security obsessed, are like I said again, for maniacs by maniacs. They are a lot harder to use than more modern password managers. Bitwarden is exceptionally simple to use. And the other thing that I know I talked about at one point, but I will always talk about it again, don't start using a password manager and think that you have to immediately get all of your passwords into it. Make yourself a list of like 3 to 5, or I think I say 5 to 8 of the passwords that you use all the time. Get those in your password manager, and then as you log into other things, start migrating them, which will also give you the opportunity to like update your password. But the advantages of using something like Bitwarden as opposed to like the Firefox password manager is the notes section, where you're able to like save things like your security answers, which means that you can make up different security answers so that you don't have to rely on the same like pool of questions and answers. So because your security answers have almost certainly been exposed in a breach, so if you're using the same ones that you were using 10 years ago, it's a risk. If you're using the same ones now that you're using in 10 years, it's a massive risk. So your high school mascot wasn't the Bulldogs, it was the unicorns, but only when you're filling it out for this one website. The next one, it's the fairies. The next one, it's the walruses. Like, you should have different answers for those, but you can't do that in a browser-only password manager because it's just in the browser. It doesn't give you a good comprehensive notes section. The other really nice thing that I like about Bitwarden and working with the Bitwarden Authenticator, so this is a new nice thing that I like about it, is that if you have the Bitwarden Authenticator installed, or actually you can use this with other authenticators as well, you can sync your authenticators with it and have it save for the Bitwarden Authenticator specifically. You can have it sync your authenticator to your password manager. So if you lose the device that has your authenticator on it, it doesn't matter. You can still have all of the authenticator passkeys so that you can set those accounts up again without having to worry about losing access. It makes the use of an authenticator a lot safer, a lot less risky. I know I rant about this a lot. Wait, cursing is getting automated? No, it should not be getting automated. Fuck that. No. I will have to change that. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, notes are fantastic. I really, So, okay, and with the password manager, the password for your password manager, this is the thing that scares everybody, and I completely understand it because, it is something to definitely worry about. But 2 things about it. Number 1, if you lose the password to your password manager, you're pretty much still okay. The scary thing is you don't want to lose the password manager to the password to your authenticator. If you lose the password to your password manager, you can still use whatever recovery accounts you had set up otherwise to reset the passwords for those accounts. So that's fine. It'll be a pain in the ass if it happens, but it's probably not going to happen. The second thing is, like Fluffy said, this is one where unless you have a severe risk of like living with somebody who's an abuser, you are actually okay for your password manager to write it down and put it someplace safe. The thing that I always say is write it down and put it in your underwear drawer. That's just a stand-in for wherever it's going to be safe and that people aren't going to go looking for it. Don't put it on a Post-it note on the bottom of your keyboard. Don't write it in the back of a notebook that you keep on your desk all the time. But the other thing about it is you're going to be entering this password all the time, and it should be the only password you're entering all the time, so it should be something that you're going to end up remembering pretty well. Let's see, this is, I don't know if that's visible. Okay, yeah, this little key here is a password manager that I used to use for work at Gary's business, so I haven't used it regularly since 2024. I had to log into it the other day. I was like, I have forgotten my password for the password manager. Oh no. And because it's a business password manager, I would have been able to get access to it by like having somebody else who is an admin on it reset it. But I sat there, I didn't remember it for a few minutes. I was like trying to figure out how to get in. And then it came back to me because the way that I had the password set up for that was a song that was one of my favorite songs the year that I created the password for it. And had been released that year. So I was like, that's right. That was the song that I was using all the time. So I just typed in a couple of initialisms from the song. So, it's like, let's say you've got the chorus. The chorus has 4 lines. Each line is maybe like 8 to 10 words or something like that. It's the first letter of each word, any punctuation that might be included in there, and then like the year that it came out. So, like if it was Tom Petty's Last Dance with Mary Jane, there's pigeons now in Market Square. She's standing in her underwear. TPIMSSSHU92 would be the password, maybe with a comma in there or something like that. So thank you. I will take that screen grab, and sorry, it's going to pop it up in that window. Okay. I am also using Chatterino, so I don't 100%. What was I looking at? Other than that, I was looking at there. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out how to moderate if I'm in Chatterino. Okay, I don't. I will look at that after, and yeah, because that shouldn't be, swearing should not be modded. But yeah. Sorry, catching up on chat. So, and yes, you can, for all of these password managers, actually what you can do is you can export them to a file on your computer, and you would then need to have like 7-zip or something set up so that you could create that as an encrypted file, and then you could password protect that file and keep it on your machine. That's maybe a little bit of overkill. It's really hard to tell what level of like paranoia and security is overkill and is just like perfectly reasonable. I'm not good at gauging that. But yeah. But yeah. So it's, don't be too worried about it. Figure out a password that is going to be a password that you remember really easily, and think about your favorite line from a movie, your favorite lyric from a song, a quote that you say all the time with your friends or family or something like that. Yeah, that was the example that I used last time, was Ich habe eine Krankenwagen in meiner Tasche, was a line that I used to always like shout at my friends in high school. And that would be a great example of something that like IHEKWEMT. Like, okay, so that's 8 characters plus like maybe add in a year, that gets you to 10 characters, add in an exclamation point or something like that, that's 11 characters, and there you go. And I mean, like, the correct horse battery staple thing, so you can also get a lot of like entropy to your password by using the longer like sets of words like that. My deal is it's usually worthwhile to use like less common words. So, instead of like, red triangle plant or something like that, it would maybe be like, fuchsia octahedron monstera or something. You use slightly less common words that are not in the top 10,000. There are lots of arguments for like how much you actually need to be fucking paranoid about that kind of thing. But basically, like, the longer your password is, the more secure it is. Lots of people, however, won't let you enter passwords that are more than like 16 characters, which is very fucking frustrating. So you need to introduce entropy by adding, exclamation points and numbers, special characters and numbers and things like that in capital and lowercase, which is why using initialisms tends to be very simple. And especially if you're using initialism for like a song that you listen to all the time, or your favorite line from a play or something like that, that can be really, really helpful, because, you sit there, you're like worried that you're forgetting your password, and it's like, what's my password? Okay. It was a song. Okay, what songs do I like? That gets a lot easier to get back to your password. And again, that is one where, like, the password to your password manager is one that it is okay to write down and put in a secure place as long as you are not at risk of somebody, like, in your house stealing your password, because it's exceptionally unlikely that somebody outside of your house is going to break into your house to steal the password to your password manager. So, but I do definitely understand that paranoia. That is the thing that most people are the most concerned about with using an actual password manager. The thing that I would say about using a password manager that's in the browser is it really limits you to only being able to access the passwords when you are using that browser. So the example that I use for a lot of things like this is if you are, traveling, you're using your computer, and, your computer flies out of the car window or something like that and shatters into a million pieces on the road. How do you get into your bank password? How do you get into your email address password? Do you log into a browser profile on somebody else's computer? If you do that, do you remember to log out? If you need to, like, say, go to a library and use their computer to do something, are you able to install that browser, and do you want to log into your browser account on that computer? That's the reason that, like, the other thing about having a password manager like Bitwarden or something like that is, like, okay, cool, say you do have to go use a computer at the library, which is a, pain in the butt or whatever, but you're probably not going to be able to install Firefox on that if it already isn't there. You're not necessarily going to want to log into a personal account on that, but you will be able to, if you have your phone in your pocket and you've got Bitwarden on it, log into the app on your phone, get the password from your phone, and type it in on the computer. So, yeah, the portability of Bitwarden is really, really incredible. But yeah, yeah, not and the other thing about it is, like, okay, cool, even if you do carry a flash drive with a Firefox on it, like, there's a decent chance that, like, okay, cool, are the USB ports on the computer going to be accessible? Like, a lot of cases these days, like, maybe not. So let's see. I mean, I will say the thing is, I just always carry, you know, I always carry at least two phones with Firefox on them, so I'm never too far away from having Firefox on my person if it's necessary. um, but yeah, I don't know. And a lot of these scenarios are unlikely. I I personally know somebody who was only able to use Tumblr from a specific iPad because they had set up 2FA on their Tumblr, and the device that had the authenticator on it literally fell into the ocean. And so their primary Tumblr, which had been their primary social media for years, and they had built up, like, a lot of business stuff related to, was only accessible through one device that was, like, one restart away from locking them out. And because they had it set up with an authenticator, they couldn't work with, like, staff or anything like that to get a password reset. So that's one of those things where I'm like, this is my example of, like, the scariest possible way this kind of thing could happen. What do you do to prevent that from happening? And the way that you avoid things like that happening is you become, like, device and login agnostic. You make sure that you have multiple ways to get into things. So this is the other great thing about a password manager like Bitwarden. I have 2FA set up on Tumblr. I also have all of my authenticator keys, my recovery keys in Bitwarden. So, like, I've got the authentication, and that's great. That means that people are not going to be able to log into my account if, like, a password gets leaked or something like that. But also, if I get locked out of my authentication method, I have recovery keys saved elsewhere, someplace that is accessible not only through the same method. So that's the deal, is, like, it's the Swiss cheese method. So, there's maybe a little gap in each method, but you layer things to the point that you should be covered. You should always have a way to get back into things. So, you've got a backup recovery method, you've got an authenticator set up, and you've got your authenticator recovery key saved someplace. You've got your, password saved in a secure location. Like, it's just, like, I'm aware that I am probably more paranoid and more aggressive about this than most people are. But I also, like, have seen what happens when people aren't paranoid and aggressive about this, and I just want them to be okay. So I just want people to use something, and that's again why I recommend Bitwarden so much, is just because it really is the kind of thing that like I've set up multiple people who are non-technical to use it as well, where like yes, this becomes something that can become very, very comfortable and easy to use. So that's probably enough ranting about Bitwarden for me for today. But let's see. I remember being on a road trip to a friend's wedding and an online game you were playing got suspicious of you logging in from the hotel room and made you reset the password. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the other thing that becomes so much easier when like you do have a password manager. So it's like, yeah, you don't have to remember a new password. You're playing the online game and you paste the password in from your password manager, which has generated it from you. You save it. You never have to worry about remembering it. Like, and yeah, the KeyPass. I think KeyPass is one of the ones that's relatively user unfriendly. Again, Bitwarden, and for a lot of these, even the ones that are more user friendly, like the limitation of only being able to install it on one or two devices is infuriating. I hate that. You should be able to have your password manager in like 5 million places. You should be able to, if you want, put like a password manager extension that you can log into on literally every computer you interact with. Not just computers that you use, but interact with if you want to. Like, and so the idea of like, oh, well, you can only have it installed on one computer as an application, and then you can have it like installed on your phone as an application. It's like, no, unacceptable. No. So the portability is like a huge, huge deal. And that's what is really fantastic about Bitwarden, is it's so portable. It's got so many options for you, because it's like, yeah. And on top of all of that, by the way, I haven't mentioned that if your entire bag of technology falls out of the window or into the ocean or something like that, the other really great thing about Bitwarden is it has an online accessible site. You can go to the website and log into your vault from the website, so you don't even need the extension installed or an application installed. You can literally just log into your vault on the website and have it accessible no matter what browser you're in. So, and I have definitely used that at things like, the example that I've used a couple times too has been like a hotel business center or something like that. I've used at like the hotel computers when I've been at like conferences and things like that. I have used that to like print out a boarding pass and go access my email. So, yeah, it's handy, because I'm certainly not going to be installing a password manager extension on the hotel computer, but I do need to access their printer. So not the brain space to not having to devote to passwords, to not having to think about creating passwords, like, and I talked about it a little bit the other day, where it's like, yeah, I log into like 300 Microsoft accounts because I do so for work. I can't survive without a password manager. And same deal with like a ton of other stuff. Like, not only do I have 58 side blogs on Tumblr, I have 8 Tumblr blogs, like separate logins for them. I have probably 10, maybe 15 Gmail accounts. I have probably a similar number of Proton accounts and things like that. And so it's just like, I have too much, too much going on. So I need to have it managed for me, because I'm certainly not going to manage it myself. But yeah, I just really like password managers. Yeah, torrenting at work. Like, people just don't think about stuff. I mean, so spiraling, I would say, like, if there's an option to like archive or something like that, or if you can like change the title of it just to like, Z dash or whatever, so it like drops to the bottom. Honestly, like, it may be worthwhile to keep those around at least for a little while, because, maybe you get a call from the office saying like, hey, we got locked out of your computer and we actually turned out had some information that we needed on that. Is there any way that you can log back in? Might help. Does happen sometimes. Like, if it's been more than 2 years, fuck it, you can delete those. But if it's only been like a couple months or something like that, nah, hang on to it for a little while, just in case. Oh, okay, cool. As long as they were shared. So, how long did it take me to get diagnosed with ADHD? Until I was 31. So, yeah. And the autism is still not an official diagnosis, but I'm pretty sure we can just call it. So, yeah, no, I am many things, George. I like lots of things. I like lots of things and knowing lots of things. So, But yeah, I have lots of passwords, lots of blogs, lots of books, lots of things. So, um, but yeah. Let's see, catching up. So I'm also trying to remember. Yeah. My therapist when he diagnosed the ADHD, I was like, okay, but I've also had people say this about autism, and he was like, no, you're too social for that. I was like, I don't think that's how it works. But he was also like 78, so I was not going to have that argument with him. My current therapist, who primarily like helps people who are uh, like 7 flavors of neurodivergent, is like, I think we can call it. I'm not able to give you a formal diagnosis, but there's enough overlap that like I'm comfortable with doing everything but like sticking a post-it note on your forehead. So yeah, yeah. Which like I'm not gonna do anything about. I actually prefer not having the formal diagnosis because like Large Bastard and I have talked about like adopting kids in the future, and that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, that might actually be detrimental if that's something that I want to do. But at the same time, knowing that like, oh, okay, cool, this explains why X, Y, or Z thing happens at least a little bit, and I can use that as information to like make accommodations for myself. Sweet. That's what I care about with that. The ADHD was a lot more important to actually get the medication. So, um, but yeah, it's I have been what's the I've been peer reviewed by quite a few people. I've been involuntarily peer reviewed by quite a few people. So, congrats on the diagnosis, even though it was late. But yeah, the meds. I mean, I think theoretically, like I could ask for various work accommodations if I wanted to, but I don't know that there are any specific accommodations that would like cover stuff for autism that wouldn't also cover stuff for ADHD. So I just, yeah, there's not much like that one's. It's unfortunate because it's like a riskier diagnosis to have. It has like more potentially detrimental outcomes. So to having a formal diagnosis. So, which sucks because I don't think that there should be like risks associated with having that diagnosis. I think that's like incredibly fucking ableist of our society, but we live in an ableist society. This is something that's kind of come up. Like I have like absolutely no judgment whatsoever for people who have chosen to get like gender markers changed on driver's licenses or anything like that. But like that was something where in California a while back it was like, okay, cool. It became very easy to put non-binary markers on your driver's license and everything like that. And like I had a couple friends who like were kind of mad at me for not doing so, and I was like, look, I just don't need any cop pulling me over knowing that I'm any flavor of trans or queer or anything like that. I just don't need it to say on my driver's license that this is a thing because they don't need to fucking know that. I know that, and that's good enough for me, and it's not going to make an impact on like if I go to a doctor or something like that because I can just tell the fucking doctor. But same deal with using pronouns in like emails and things like that. My office uses pronouns, like they have the option to put pronouns in our email signatures, and I don't. And I'm one of like a couple people at the company who is like in the non-binary trans umbrella, and all of the cis people put their pronouns just fine, and I'm like, no, because you don't want to know my fucking pronouns, because if I put my pronouns in there, it's going to be a fucking problem for me the way that it's not for you. So but yeah, and so same kind of deal with like an autism diagnosis. Is it's like the stigma associated with it and the like potential legal problems associated with it are so much more significant than like with ADHD, or it's like the difference between getting and talking about like a depression diagnosis versus like a schizoaffective diagnosis. These are different things, and we need to understand that they are treated differently. um Sorry, I'm now catching up. Yes, professionals take decades to diagnose, but school bullies figure it out right away. My thing with autism specifically is that my sister was diagnosed, but I was not, and that's like the kind of accommodations that she got from our family are the things that would have been nice. So, um, But yeah, and I mean, like, especially like what we were seeing with like fucking Doge. I fucking hate it. But like, all of the information that like was being pulled out by like conservatives in, like national information databases last year, like I just don't need this to be on a list. It's sometimes I wish I'm aware that in a little I'm weird in some ways, and that like people don't necessarily like the approach to like firearms that I have and things like that. But like this is one of those things where like a lot of the stuff that like ends up coming up in like uh, uh, sex work advocacy or like disability advocacy, like is a lot of stuff that like gun communities are also actually really fucking vocal about, and that like these are groups that should talk to one another a lot, because like the amount of ableism that's present in a lot of like firearms communities like is something that like it needs to be more addressable. But also like you get these weird overlaps where like you'll have some gun people who are like, well, anybody who's, been diagnosed with any mental disorder needs to never be able to own guns. And then you get the actual 2A maniacs who are like, that means that you are incentivizing people to diagnose you to take away your fucking firearms. Don't do that. And so it's like you end up with these groups that like seem like they would have like disparate political ideologies. I don't know. Once you get into like a certain flavor of like left libertarianism, it all makes sense to kind of go together. So, but yeah, that's there. Like because the same kind of conversation comes up when you're talking about firearms registries. And I have kind of complicated views on this, but the reason that like there is not like a single national database to search for firearms is because people who own firearms don't want it to be possible to do a simple national search and have the address of everybody who owns a firearm just because somebody in the government decided they wanted it that week. Honestly, from my perspective, that's a pretty decent attitude, and I think we should ensure that the same thing is happening for people who are like, I don't know, sex workers and disabled. Like, you shouldn't be able to like search a single database and get all of the information about like, let's get a list of people who are disabled this week. That's bad. I don't think that that's something that should be easy to do, and unfortunately it is. And part of that is because like that comes with like payment systems and everything like that. But yeah, it's I don't know. So I just like firearms licensure. So I worked at a gun store when I was 19, 20. I had to be older than 19. I must have been like 20, but like not a lot older than 19. And one of the things that I repeatedly saw was my coworkers intentionally failing people who took the California firearm safety test in Spanish. If they requested the test in Spanish, my coworkers immediately failed them. And I reported it to managers multiple times, and I took the tests away from the people who were grading it and regraded it a couple of times, because it was very simple to grade. There was like a like bubble sheet or whatever. But that is the thing that I get concerned about when you talk about licensure, is that the people who are in charge of granting the licenses have biases that will be reproduced in the way that the licenses are granted. This is like 100% something that we have seen over and over again with like CCWs. It's a lot easier to get a CCW as a white man than it is as a black trans woman. So it's one of those things where, from again the left libertarian perspective of like, it's all of the biases of society are going to be reproduced in all parts of society. So if you're going to be limiting rights, you have to recognize that whatever is limiting the rights is going to replicate that. And whether or not firearms access is a right is something that is definitely debatable on like a nation-to-nation level. But in the United States, it's like, look, the right has decided that they have the right to own firearms. Everybody has the fucking right to own firearms, which means... Also, again, and as usual, if you are in Southern California and you are curious about firearms and have not had experience with them or want to learn about them, I am perfectly willing, if you reach out to me, to run a training class and take you up to the range and teach you how to shoot with somebody who is safe, who is not going to be frightening. And I am perfectly willing to come to a gun store with you and bring my 7-foot-tall, extremely gun spouse with us so that you can feel safe purchasing a firearm if that's something that you were interested in doing. Like, queer firearm access and like minority firearm access is something that I'm actually pretty fucking serious about, because we're not going to be able to take the firearms away from the other people. So, but yeah, it's he is an extreme CCW, a concealed carry permit. But yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, it's so the other thing about it, because people will talk about, like, the Chris Rock joke, I don't want to limit firearms, I just want to make bullets really expensive. Well, okay, what you're doing at that point is you are closing people out of firearm safety if they're unable to pay for training, and pay for training means paying for bullets also, because you need to practice to use something safely. And that's the deal, is like, if you make any of these things that you make, it's the exact same argument as requiring national ID for voting. If you are going to require an ID for voting, you need to provide everything relating to that. If you are going to require licensing for firearms, it needs to be like free and universal, essentially. You need to make sure that everybody can access it. And the California handgun safety test, when I was administering the test, was not complicated. It was a 25-question test that was easier than most of the questions on the licensing, like on a driver's license. There are states that have different rules about it. When you start talking about things like gun show loopholes, like, this is something that people will often talk about when they're talking about like people being able to buy a gun basically with no effort. The gun show loophole, like, part of the reason gun people get mad about the idea that that's a loophole is like, well, in a lot of states, in order to go to gun shows and make any purchase, you need to have already passed a background check. So it's not a loophole, because if you've got your card to go to the gun show, you've already passed the background checks. Now, a lot of that stuff isn't like particularly well updated, and that's part of where you run into problems. But like many things in the world, it is complicated and there's nuance. And I have kind of odd opinions about them. So, but yeah, it's, let's see. Yeah, reducing access via higher prices being classism is, and that's the deal, is like, I don't want just middle class white men to be the people with guns. So, but yeah, and I also am like pretty adamant about the fact that I do think that firearm safety is something that like we should teach to everybody, the way that I think that we should teach sex ed to everybody, especially in the United States. There are literally more guns than people in the United States. Like it's not even a question. And since there are so many fucking guns here, I think that like we should teach people how to safely handle them, even if they don't plan on owning firearms. Just like we should teach people how you get pregnant, even if they're not planning on having sex. So, I am glad that your large orange tabby decided to come visit. I don't think you started typing everywhere, but I am glad that the large orange tabby came to visit. But in Switzerland, I think that their rules for firearms, so because they have the compulsory military service and everything like that, they do have a lot of guns and firearms. But I think that in order to like go to the ranges or whatever, there are like certain requirements in terms of being able to do that. It's funny, we have if you're a Swiss national living in the United States, you still need to like pass your like military qualifiers and everything like that. So we do have like Swiss nationals who will come and do their like firearms training at some of the local ranges. Large Bastard is the president of a local range. Like it's a he does not have like a ton of the same political alignments that I do, but it is very funny to me that his like shooting range is a co-op basically. So it's a cooperative organization with like a couple thousand members, and yeah, he's the president of his shooting co-op basically. Yeah, like so he worked at a shooting range, and like the gun store that I worked at is a store where like some of his coworkers from the range also worked. So, but yeah, it's guns are a big part of my life, and so I've spent a lot of time thinking about them, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about them as a leftist. And I absolutely also understand this is okay. So I was planning on talking a little bit about research today, and this is in part because of like the posts that I made on like Thursday or whatever about the homeless population as a proportion of the murder victims in Los Angeles. And long story short, there was a newspaper report about a decrease in the number of homeless deaths in 2024, which is the first time in LA County we had seen a decrease in the number of homeless deaths since they started recording it. And in that report, it said that 5% of the deaths of homeless in the year that they were measuring were due to homicide. And I was looking at that number and I saw that it was like almost 200 or something like that. It was like 184 or something. And since I know a lot about crime statistics, I was like, 184 is actually a really large portion of the murders that happened in LA County in that year. Like, that's way higher than 5% of the murders that happened. What percentage of the murders that happened were among the homeless population, not what percentage of the deaths among the homeless population were due to murders? So started looking into it, started digging into it. Thank you, Fluffy, for linking it. Basically looking at the numbers on it, homeless people account for between I looked at math for various years, but it was between like 15 and 20% of the homicides in LA County in the years that I was looking at. So they're a way higher percentage of the population of homicide victims than like the only other thing that was like as likely was like if you were like male, like if you were a young male, that was because like I think it's like 14% of the homicide victims were women, 86% were men. Black people were a relatively high proportion, but I think that it was still no. So black people must have been okay. So black people are 12% of the population. And were a higher percentage. They were disproportionately represented in homicide victims. However, they were not as disproportionately represented as the unhoused were, because black people are about 12% of the population in Los Angeles. Unhoused people are less than 0.1% of the population, and yet make up 15 to 20% of the murder victims. Incredible disparity. Like that's the kind of way that I end up digging into like a lot of statistics and looking at crime rates and everything like that. Firearms deaths and mass shootings and things like that is something that I have done a lot of statistical digging into in the past. And like one of the things that I think goes really underreported is the like sheer number of like mass shootings that are actually domestic violence incidents. So it's not something that people talk a lot about. The other thing that's really interesting to me, like from a firearms perspective, is like the indicators of like a higher casualty event. It sounds horrible to talk about all of these things. But basically like there are certain indicators where it's like, bringing a number of different guns, bringing multiple types of guns. For some reason, bringing a shotgun in addition to any other kind of firearm is an indicator that this is going to have like a really high number of casualties. Now, it's been a long time since I've looked at these statistics, so I'm sure things have been changed pretty significantly by like outlier events like Uvalde, where like there was a single kind of firearm. But the thing about it is like they are such unusual events that like the way that we look at them and the way that we like explore and examine them, I think that even if you didn't have like the issue of firearms in the United States, that we would still see a higher number of high count murders in the United States than you see in a lot of similar countries. And I think it's because like we are societally violent and we have like certain forms of entitlement that like other countries don't necessarily. Family annihilators is another thing that like is really interesting to look at comparing the United States to other places. And like it really does, it like really digging into these statistics like demystifies a lot of crime. And this is part of why I am the way I am about crime. Crime is actually rare. Like people don't like crime is a lot more rare, or a lot of types of crime are a lot more rare than people are willing to grant. Some kinds of crime are a lot more common than people are willing to grant, but that's like kind of a separate conversation. But like, it's important to remember that like crime is exceptionally uncommon, especially when you're talking about things like mass shootings. That is, it's a terrible thing that happens. It's not a thing that should happen. Like, there can be things done that can prevent and improve like our societal outcomes that lead to that sort of thing. But at the same time, again, I don't want to make it so that only wealthy white men are the ones who have firearms, because as it turns out, those are the ones who are most likely to do the shootings anyway, and they're the ones who are going to be able to keep getting them if we like implement more of the restrictions that people talk about. So it's complicated and nuanced, like so many things. And I do want to see a recent photo of the Menace of the Kitty, so I'm going to. Oh, what is the kitty's name? Yeah, well, I mean, the disconnect between the American dream and most people's lived reality is capitalism. Like, post-war wealth and capitalism, like, do a lot of good of explaining, first of all, the idea of where the American dream came from, at least as, like, a kind of marketing concept, because the American dream is theoretically, like, social mobility. Social mobility has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse over the decades. Charlie or Goofus or Sir. Sir is here, yes. I don't know that anybody has heard me call puzzles since, you know, she's been hanging out on the stream. She's Tiny Bastard or Miss Little or the Critter or Miss Bug or, you know, one of a million things. I understand. So Mr. Charlie, Sir, is it's got a very good face. It's a very sweet face. So, but I will take Charlie off screen in case you don't want Charlie too much on screen. But yeah, so I was gonna also kind of talk about like research methods today, and like I think I put in the title that like from Kent, handsome. Orange cats are so good. I've only had one orange cat, and it was a female orange cat. Her name was Scooter, and she was fantastic. We have the neighbor and his ferals. There was an orange cat who I named Creamsicle because he was a dilute orange tabby. And I haven't seen him in a while. And then there's another one who's been wandering around, who I haven't given a name yet, but he's a Manx, or he has like the Manx mutation. So it's a big orange cat with like a stub of a tail, but like the stub of the tail, you can tell it's like, this is not necessarily a good thing, kitty. The Creamsicle Menace is another of Goofus's nicknames. I like that. So with okay, like one of the violence is a solution versus nonviolence is a solution. This is like a lot of this is cultural, and so I think that like the way that the right wing ends up making violence seem like a solution is because the right wing is authoritarian. So if there's no way to appeal to authority, then you have no recourse except to attempt to overthrow the authority, which is almost always necessarily going to be violent. But the other thing about that is I think that legitimately what we are seeing in the US a lot these days is I think that people are feeling disenfranchised and unable to truly participate in their political system. And what's the quote? I think is it a Martin Luther King Jr. quote? I mean, a riot is the voice of the unheard is certainly one thing, but essentially, it's those who make peaceful protest impossible, make violent revolution inevitable. Basically, if you make it impossible to peacefully get the things that you need in your society, if you can't vote for them because you've been gerrymandered to hell and back, if you can't do a strike for them because you're not allowed to do any kind of labor action because labor action is becoming increasingly illegal, if you can't protest because we shoot tear gas at free speech protesters, you are building a society in which the only recourse is violence. The only recourse is people talking about assassinations or things like that, people doing a Luigi, because what the fuck else are you going to do if your healthcare's fucked? Like, if you get turned down, you know, you manage to keep a job, you get healthcare through your job, you put in your time, you pay your copays, and you still get turned down for the treatment that you need. what do you do? What do you do at that point? Do you go get another job and get different health insurance? How long does that take? It's really fucking hard to get a job. Do you challenge the health insurance company? What effort is required for that? Do you pay out of pocket? How much does that fucking cost? You end up in a situation where people feel completely helpless. And so that's why you start seeing these kinds of violent reactions, and that's also why you see people being so sympathetic to the people doing the violent reactions. Now, there's an issue about this, which is anarchists are familiar with this. This is a concept known as can be known as the propaganda of the deed, where doing an assassination as a form of propaganda or doing violence as a form of propaganda for your ideology. The thing is, this doesn't work super well, and it makes people hate your ideology, and it increases the violence in society. A counter to this kind of argument is an article that I share and link all the time, which is a CrimethInc article called Against the Logic of the Guillotine. And it is, let me grab the link. There we go. I have it bookmarked. As an archive, because I like things as archives. But essentially the point that Against the Logic of the Guillotine makes is that if you rely on a guillotine to solve your problems culturally, the guillotine is coming for you. And in addition to that, it also touches on the idea that, like, a guillotine is state violence, and state violence is never going to be 100% used against the people who are, like, deserving of it. The state violence is always going to be wielded against people who are unfairly victimized by it. But yeah, no. So, and again, I explained it poorly, but the person's argument was that growing up in a leftist space, doing something about the thing that was upsetting you starts with writing articles, donating to food banks, etc. Growing up with right wing, you don't have those instincts, so you jump to violence. It's an interesting thread. So again, I think the thing is that comes down to authoritarianism. If you are growing up kind of with a leftist, or like a not even leftist, but a relatively permissive parental structure or something like that, or a parental structure that involves dialogue, you do have other recourses. You do have other things to talk about. If you have a problem with somebody at school, your first recourse isn't to, like, get in a fight with them at school. It's to tell your parents, because your parents are people who you trust and they will listen to what you say about it. But if you have a problem with someone at school and your parents say, well, that's your fault, that's something that you don't have many other choices. That limits your ability to, like, have options for it. And with the authoritarianism, that expands to, like, other parts. If you have a problem with the teacher, no, you don't, because the teacher's the authority. You suck it up and deal with it. And that means that you become resentful and start acting out in other ways. And I would posit that this is largely as a result of the authoritarian strains visible and present in right-wing communities. But yeah, like, honor culture. So my deal is, like, most cultures are honor cultures. Like, it's really, like, in the United States, we're absolutely, like, white Western, whatever the fuck we call this culture. We're an honor culture. We're 100% an honor culture. It's why you see jokes about dads, like, wanting to shoot their daughters' prom dates. That the entire, like, core of that joke is, my daughter is not a sexual being. It is not allowed to be a sexual being, and you or she will both be punished for her being sexualized. That's an honor culture joke. It's just that we don't typically frame it that way. Because a lot of that is really racialized. So, but with high and low trust society is, like, I don't know much about the, like, true sociology of that, but, like, I don't know. I think there are other axes that, like, kind of cause. Oh, hello. She has decided she wants to eat more of her food. Yeah, I don't know. I, like, a lot of what I like about the, like, kinds of politics that I participate in and believe in is stuff that it's like, it shouldn't matter how much trust there is in a society. The society should function and should protect people regardless of whether or not it's a high or low trust society. But, like, that's one of those things where it's like, it's complicated and really demanding, and involves a lot of participation in society from people. So, let's see. Oh man, the people on Tumblr who end up with like these stereotypes about animals, where it's like, oh, orange cats are all dumb, so your cat can't be smart because he's orange. Sorry, you guys are doing like phrenology for cats. Shut the fuck up. Like people are so so awful about that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, well, and so honor. The thing is, like, honor culture is like I don't. I think the idea of like an honor culture in a high or low trust society, I think these are more pop culture concepts than like actual sociology concepts. But Yeah, so I actually would say that it's not necessarily about like an honor culture or not. I would say, and again, going back to the authoritarianism, it is down to a punitive impulse, where the way that things are reinforced is through punishment, not through consensus, not through discussion, not through debate, not through compromise, but where rules are enforced by punishment. If you break the rules, you're going to get punished for it. You behave yourself in the society because you want to avoid punishment. This is like core to authoritarianism. And I think a lot of people who come to leftism after having been raised in like groups and cultures like that don't necessarily re-examine that as part of like their political change. So this is, I think, how you end up with a lot of people who are like ostensibly leftist but still very much in favor of like long prison sentences or like the, kill your local pedophile or whatever. It's like, okay, that's a punitive impulse. That's coming from someplace that like is more interested in punishing a perceived wrong than it is in preventing a real harm. And that's something that, like, I think, again, talking about the homelessness thing that I ended up digging into the other day, people are not interested in preventing deaths among the homeless by housing people. They're interested in punishing people for becoming houseless. This is why we see, the Trump admin attempting to crack down and prevent any kind of housing first initiatives. This is why I hate Gavin Newsom with like an unspeakable fury, because he has stymied housing first initiatives forever because he has really reactionary and punitive ideas about being unhoused. And he always has. It's been a huge part of his politics for fucking decades. And that's something where it's like, to me, that's part of why Gavin Newsom doesn't look that left and also doesn't look that different from the Trump administration. This is something that also becomes frustrating when you end up like far enough to like apolitical ideology, where it's like, I get that people get angry at the idea that like, oh, well, the Democrats and the Republicans are exactly the same. And it's like, no, they're not. They would have materially different outcomes for blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay. Kamala Harris and Trump. If Kamala Harris were in office, I very much doubt that Kamala Harris would be doing anything in Iran like what's happening right now. However, I still think that she would be giving the exact same kind of military aid to Israel that the Trump admin did before the Iranian attacks, or before the attacks on Iran, not that Iran attacked Israel or anything like that. And other than that, I think that we would still be dealing with the issues of basically at a certain point, it's like, well, the reason that people say that Democrats and Republicans are the same is because they're capitalist, because they're both capitalist, because the end goal is still like the salvation and the function of capital, not because, sorry, there's a song called Gay Woman Drone Pilot that somebody has made that's about like, how the military is very woke these days. The U.S. military is very woke these days. You can absolutely be a gay woman drone pilot bombing a, Yemeni wedding, and one of the verses in the song is a Black South Asian prosecutor talking about a case that Kamala Harris like pushed for like really harsh punishments on, about a Black man who had been incredibly wrongly accused of a crime where people had like witnesses on site had said like, no, it was a white man who did this. And so it's like, Black South Asian prosecutor putting this Black man in jail for a long time and like potentially like having him subject to the death penalty. This is functionally the same as if a Republican was in office for that person, at least. That outcome is not. And so that's the difference, where if you're looking at somebody like who is actively like a progressive prosecutor, like a George Gascon or something like that, versus Kamala Harris was never a progressive prosecutor. She was always just a prosecutor. Also, if we're talking about the fact that Republicans and Democrats from certain perspectives look exactly the same. Every fucking time I hear anybody from the Trump admin saying that we have the most powerful military in the world, that we have the most deadly military in the world, it's exactly the line that Kamala Harris used on stage at the DNC while she was running for office. If you don't, and that's why they look exactly the same, because it's Democrats and Republicans are both interested in serving U.S. imperialism and in protecting capital. So I'm gonna scan back because I've been ranting a little. Yeah. Also, by the way, hi. I don't know how to this has come up several times. I don't know how to pronounce people's names, so I'm reading this as Zigmalitotes, but I don't know if that's correct. But hi. But yeah, the Gavin Newsom mentioned the Gavin Newsom. It's not hard to get me on that. Yeah, Gavin Newsom tearing down homeless camp. He's been bad about this since he was the mayor of San Francisco. He's been fucking awful about homelessness forever. It's why I've hated him forever. It's the first thing that I hated about him. But that's the thing, is like most Democrats, so Fluffy Blue, you're saying it's wild that doesn't get him kicked out of office, like Jesus Christ, the inhumanity of it, of him tearing down homeless encampments. That's what most voters want. Even Democrats. They want people tearing down homeless encampments because they don't actually know anything about homelessness. Because they think people shouldn't be in these places, they should be in shelters, because they've never been to a fucking shelter and they don't know how fucking awful the shelters are. They think that the choice is not, go to a shelter, throw away all of your stuff, lose your pets, potentially get in fights, have, issues with your shit getting stolen, or sleep in a tent where you have all of your things and you have a community that you feel relatively safe in. They think the choice is stay in a tent, do drugs, panhandle, annoy people, be a threat, rape people, or go to a shelter and be a productive member of society. Because people just straight up don't fucking know. Unhoused people are so dehumanized to the vast majority of the housed population that, like, even people who are liberal frequently think of it as choices that are being made that need to be punished. That's why that's why a lot of my analysis of this comes down to a punitive impulse, is like they think that people want to be homeless because it allows them to be degenerate in the way that they want to be, because it lets them do drugs. And it's because they've never really thought about how somebody gets there, and because they think it's their fault. They think that people only become homeless because they make bad choices, because they don't think about how people actually become homeless. They don't listen to it when homeless people are talking about becoming homeless. They don't think about the fact that, like, I think it's something like 76% of people who are unhoused are employed. Like it's Zugmalatotes. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to abbreviate it to Z. Zugmalatotes. Okay, Zugmalatotes. I'll try. The dyslexia is strong with me. So, but yeah, just avoid, just apply to jobs harder. Yeah, like it's, so, but, yeah. I think that even if we don't look at it, because I am like anti-carceral, I am, a prison abolition advocate. Like, I know I'm like on the far radical side of a lot of these things. I do think that, even if we frame it as moving away from a punitive culture, I think more than that, I think it is, people need to examine where their punitive impulses are coming from and see if that reflects reality. And I think that part of the problem is that people genuinely don't understand what reality looks like. So they don't understand the reality of what homeless shelters look like. They don't understand the reality of what it makes to become, or what causes somebody to become homeless. Like, and so as a result, when they're looking at, people should be punished for panhandling and they should be put in jail for doing this, that, or the other thing, and it's fine when their horrible drug den tents get torn down by the governor, they don't even recognize that they're not reflecting reality. They are not questioning whether or not they're looking at something that's propagandistic, that has been presented to them incorrectly in order to like further a narrative. So, but that's the thing is like, I think that people should, whenever you feel like you need to punish somebody for something, and also, I mean, it does also to a certain extent involve like redefining what you think of as punishment, because that's something I think people also don't really spend a lot of time thinking about. But if you find yourself wanting to punish somebody for something, ask, why am I mad at this person? Why do I think they need to be punished for the thing they're doing? Are they actually doing the thing that I think they're doing? What are options aside from doing the thing that I think that they're doing? Are there things preventing them from participating in those options? Are there things that are forcing them into this? And basically, I think I think everybody needs to be a hell of a lot more thoughtful in society than they are, which is the thing that, talking about the kind of society that I believe in, the kind of politics that I believe in, it does require a lot more participation and buy-in from people than I think a lot of people either have or are willing to put in. It's a lot easier to believe that homeless people are doing so because they want to be able to do drugs and they don't want to have to, give up their drugs to go into the shelter. They're doing it because they're gross. It's easier to believe they're doing it because they're gross than to understand that you are living in and participating in a society that profits off of dehumanizing people and allows these people to be as like at risk and in danger as they are, specifically so that your boss can use them to scare you so that you don't quit, because otherwise you'll die without your health care. It's a bad society. So it's a lot easier to just go, oh no, they're gross, not our society is fundamentally broken. And I get why people don't want to do that. I get why people don't want to think that way. It's a shitty way to because it means the world sucks. If the things that I'm saying are true, it means the world sucks, and I don't want the world to suck. The world shouldn't suck. The world should be full of people who have good intentions and are doing things for the right reasons. And, if the governor is tearing down homeless encampments, it's not because he's doing so in order to essentially make profits for the fucking Silicon Valley companies that are taking away all of our privacy. It should be because he wants them to have a better life. That's why he's doing it, right? Maybe. So, yeah, it's, let's see. Yeah, your hobby when you were working in a career job in an industry where everyone makes six figures and nobody has struggles is just slight in the fact that I was homeless for a month before starting that job, because at the time I did not like somebody who looked like somebody who could be homeless, and nobody liked that. But yeah, no, and it's